morning. Thank you for tuning in to View TV News. I'm Vijitra Dongdi in Hong Kong, and these are the stories making headlines tonight. Tense scenes in Central as protesters set fire to barricades and smash MTR exits. It comes after thousands joined a march in the city calling for U.S. lawmakers to support anti-government protests. The Hong Kong Journalists Association condemns police after they pepper sprayed journalists in Mongkok last night. And U.S. President Donald Trump cancels peace talks with the Taliban after the militant group took credit for an attack in Kabul that claimed the life of an American soldier. Good evening. Our top story is one that will likely further develop tonight as anti-government protests continue in the city. Protesters have swarmed parts of Central with some black-clad figures burning barricades and smashing glass at MTR exits. This comes after police made arrests inside Central Station and preemptively shut it down earlier today. This afternoon, thousands marched to the U.S. consulate calling for American lawmakers to take action to support the pro-democracy protests. They want Congress to pass the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act tomorrow, a legislation which would sanction officials in Beijing and Hong Kong. It also paves the way for Washington to evaluate every year whether to give Hong Kong special trade and business privileges. Our correspondent Ryan Chang was there early outside the consulate and filed this report.
Well, this rally outside the U.S. consulate is calling for the passage of the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, which activists hope will bring punitive measures against government officials who they say are suppressing their freedoms. Many activists here have been carrying large U.S. flags, chanting and singing the U.S. national anthem, and also there have been calls for Donald Trump to come and, quote, liberate Hong Kong. Many of them have come from a peaceful gathering in Chater Garden where they've been repeating protesters' demands and slogans as well. Now, earlier I spoke to some of these demonstrators and this is what they said.
We hope by waving the American flag, we can let Americans know we need their help. We need them to step up in the name of justice and liberate Hong Kong.
If the bill passes, Hong Kongers will feel safer because it will keep lawmakers and government officials in check. They'll show restraint while doing the bad things that they think help the Chinese government.
I'm not very afraid for people to say that this is foreign interference because, well, the world is no longer living in a local place. We are living internationally, and especially Hong Kong is an international financial hub.
Well, this is the first major protest that's been organized after Carrie Lam's withdrawal of the extradition bill. Many of the activists here have turned their calls instead to broader calls for universal suffrage and also investigation into police brutality.
And pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong has been arrested again. His political group, Demosisto, are saying there's been a misunderstanding after police accused the 22-year-old of breaching bail conditions. Wong, through his lawyer, confirmed he's been detained at airport customs. He was on his way to Germany and the U.S., which were trips he thought had been approved as part of his bail conditions. Wong says it's likely a mistake has been made on his bail certificate and that he's expecting to be released tomorrow morning. The Hong Kong Journalists Association, along with the Press Photographers Association, have condemned the police for pepper spraying journalists in Mongkok last night. In a written statement, they called their action an abuse of power, saying some frontline officers are losing control of their emotions and engaging in hostile attacks on journalists. They said police gave no warnings before spraying and that there were no protesters around at the time. The associations also criticized the police for not displaying any badges, making it difficult for reporters to lodge a formal complaint. Police, meanwhile, also went on hours-long clampdown against anti-government protesters across the city. Amelie has more on the events of last night.
What started out as a peaceful gathering in solidarity with injured protesters outside Prince Edward MTR station descended into a violent confrontation with the police. At night, protesters set roadblocks on fire in front of the Mongkok police station. They then backed down with their umbrellas opened for protection as they were chased down by riot police. A few blocks away, another team of riot police and raptors charged at protesters on Nathan Road and arrested some of them. Police fired pepper spray during the dispersal operation, and several journalists were hit. Chaos also broke out in the other parts of the city. Anti-extradition protesters swarmed Tai Po Market Station along the East Rail Line, damaging facilities inside the station. Riot police stormed in just minutes later and took down a dozen of protesters. One of them suffered head injury and left a bloody trail. Crowds also built up a few stations away at Sha Tin, where riot police used pepper spray to disperse them. The MTR quickly announced an emergency and evacuated the station. As of Sunday morning, the hospital authority says 19 were injured and sent to hospital, including 2 men in serious condition. Ahmed Lee, VTV News.
Macau casino heirs Pansy Ho and Annie Wu, daughter of catering group Maxim's founder James Wu, are likely heading to Geneva this coming week. They'll be there to defend the Hong Kong government's handling of the extradition crisis to the UN Human Rights Council. The South China Morning Post is reporting the pair will give a speech about the ongoing protests on behalf of the Hong Kong Federation of Women, a pro-government group. The two heiresses are expected to say the small group of violent protesters do not represent the view of all 7.5 million Hong Kongers. It comes as Beijing is ramping up efforts to sway international opinion on what's happening in the Chinese territory. Meanwhile, over in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, authorities had their first run-through of the National Day celebrations overnight. The rehearsal included a military parade, which lasted for an hour, as well as parades and performances by civilians. Authorities also tried out transitioning from one performance to another, as well as conducting security measures in case of an emergency. Tiananmen Square was briefly closed down overnight. October 1st marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of People's Republic of China. Mass celebrations are expected to take place all over the country. All right, let's catch up on business news. And as the trade war continues to escalate, China has seen its August exports falling unexpectedly by 1%. Analysts in a Reuters poll had expected a 2% rise. Imports also shrank for a fourth consecutive month, this time by 5.6% versus an estimated 6%. The data is showing there's further weakness in the world's second largest economy and underlining a pressing need for more stimulus as the U.S.-China spat escalates. Beijing is widely expected to announce more support measures in coming weeks to avert the risk of a sharper economic slowdown. And while the prolonged trade war between the U.S. and China has been biting a number of sectors, there's at least one place it doesn't appear to have made a dent. The French luxury brand Louis Vuitton has inaugurated a new factory in western France to meet strong demand from markets like China. David Pollard reports.
The US-China trade war has claimed its victims, but for the moment, Louis Vuitton is not among them. In fact, the French luxury goods maker this week celebrated the inauguration of a new leatherworks factory in western France, with a nod from CEO Michael Burke on why.
We see exceptional growth in China.
Chinese clients, and not just those in China, accounting for around a third of all sales. Parent company LVMH invested €1 billion in new production in France last year. This year sees not only this opening, but a plan already for others. It's looking to hire an extra 1,500 staff to join the 4,300 or so it already has across 16 sites. As for the product so coveted by the Chinese market, the little hat box bag, for example, retails at $3,200. And as for production, it aims to be smarter to cut costs and to be more sustainable by cutting or recycling surpluses.
The atelier features a workflow that is more agile. specializing in smaller series handbags that are relatively or very complicated to make.
Vuitton also has 3 production sites in the US, but the brand, Burke said, had no plans to relocate any manufacturing to China or Asia to be closer to sales. Vuitton tending to trade, he added, on its Made in France cachet.
Now let's take a look at what Wall Street might be looking out for this coming week. Apple, Kroger's supermarkets, and some consumer data are what's in the lineup. Fred Katayama has the details.
In the week ahead on Wall Street, the apple of investors' eyes may be the new subscription TV service the iPhone maker will likely reveal at its headquarters on Tuesday. Apple TV Plus is expected to compete with Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and Disney's new streaming video service, among others. Apple teased a 5-color version of its logo. That could imply it'll launch more colors for its new iPhone models. On the earnings front, look for Kroger to report a rise in quarterly sales on Thursday. Investors will be on the lookout for any comments a supermarket chain may make on its new gun policy. It's asking shoppers to stop openly carrying firearms into its stores. On Friday, Wall Street will get more details on the strength of the consumer. Retail sales growth in August is likely to have slowed to 0.2% from 0.7% the month before. Also that day, the University of Michigan's preliminary Consumer Sentiment Index is expected to show a slight increase in September from August's dismal reading.
The fallout from UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson's push for the country's no-deal exit from the European Union continues. This time, it's Amber Rudd, Britain's Work and Pension Secretary, who has quit. Rudd resigned on Saturday, saying in a Twitter post, quote, "I cannot stand by as good, loyal, moderate conservatives are expelled." Earlier this week, 21 conservative lawmakers were ousted from the leading Conservative Party after failing to vote with Johnson's government. Those expelled include the grandson of the UK's wartime leader, Winston Churchill, and 2 former finance ministers. Rudd, also a former interior minister, said the expulsions were an assault of decency and democracy. All right, time for a break now, but do stay with us. Up next. Storms across the globe are leaving a trail of destruction as the Bahamas counts the cost of Dorian, and Typhoon Ling Ling causes outages and deaths in the Koreas. More on that in just a bit.